Right.
New ones every day.
We were riding in the cemetery.
Well, it's 8 o'clock and it's still light.
Hey everybody. How's it going? Uh-oh, my PNG isn't popping. YOLO. Oh. Did I fix it? I did. Sorry about that. I forgot to get into a PC before I dropped in, so my PNG wasn't popping up, but how are you guys doing today? Hope you're doing well, hope you're staying hydrated, hope you've eaten or will eat if you haven't yet today. Yeah, hope everyone's days are going well. Mine has been long and boring. I had to give a class presentation this morning about my job again, and it was good. It went fine, except that was early this morning, and then my class was canceled, so I've been sitting around kind of doing nothing and also playing Genshin all day. I've been bored out of my mind. Please send help. So yeah, but I've decided instead of doing Am I the Asshole, because honestly I'm not having as much fun with that as I expected. I have a lot more fun with the scary stories, so, or like creepy stories and stuff, and it's mostly because it's pretty obvious to me. I like the stories on Am I the Asshole that are more unclear, I guess, or controversial, as the Reddit community says. But all of them are very clear, I guess, so that doesn't make it as fun of like debating, oh, I don't know. Anyway, I love horror stories and scary stories and creepy encounters and all that stuff, so I've decided I'm going to make my brand the Scary Stories person, and today we are trying out a new subreddit called Scary Stories. So we're gonna jump into that today. So I guess, you know, grab a snack, grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the stream. I am just going to be popping up my creator dashboard so I can see everything all fine. Make sure my bitrate is all good. And then we'll be switching over my music and hopping over to my new Scary Stories background. So, alright. Here we go. First things first, before we get started, these are all fictional stories, whereas the other two subreddits I read from, Creepy Encounters and No Sleep, are usually true stories, occasionally a toss-up. This subreddit is entirely fictional. So it is meant for original short horror fiction. That's what the subreddit description says. So keep that in mind going into this. And I will be doing my best to remember to read the Redditors' handle to give them the credit they deserve for their wonderful short stories. So, yeah, let's hop into this, and yeah, I guess that's about it. Let's hop into our first one. As always, I want to hear your thoughts in chat or on in the comments on YouTube if you're watching there. So we're just gonna read. I filtered it to the top posts of last year, and we're gonna read this top one from 11 months ago. It is called "I Found a Tape of a Woman Being Killed," and this is by O. David, which I believe is a reference to the actor in Hamilton, who is a king, by the way. Okay. I gotta get into the zone, know what I'm saying? I was at my grandmother's house, helping my grandmother move furniture around. She became my mother figure after the death of my mother when I was a young child, and I had been staying with her ever since my car accident. My grandmother helped nurse me back into health, so I made an effort to alleviate her of any and all physical tasks. I felt it was the least I could do. It was in the attic when I accidentally knocked over a box. The box was filled with VHS tapes, with the farthest dating back to 1990. All that was written on them was the year. There was a TV in the attic as well, because we used the attic as more like a functioning room than a storage space. So I decided to play the oldest tape. I expected to see happy memories, home videos, scenery, anything other than this. The video starts with whoever's holding the camera, filming a woman sitting alone at a small table at a coffee shop. She's reading. The camera was zoomed in on her hair glowing in the light, fixed. The tape then skips to a new setting in what looks like downtown Chicago somewhere. I can see the back of the same woman from before, walking down the street, oblivious to the person trailing and filming behind her. The sky is now a dark gray. I can see lights from passing cars glinting off her shiny boots. The camera's clambering and rubbing up against the jacket of the cameraman. He or she is not far from her, but is far enough away to show that he or she is not with her, clearly stalking her. The scene lasted maybe 5 minutes of the monotonous walking until it shifted to the woman now bound and stowed in the trunk of a car. She was taped up, unable to speak. All I could hear was the sound of heavy rainfall, accompanied by her screaming and crying. Her muffled panic broke my heart in two. My spine became frozen. I couldn't open my eyes any wider. Any moment the film could shift to something so much more grotesque, so morbid, so life-changing, and I could do nothing but watch in horror. I saw black-gloved, covered hands sprout from behind the camera, slam the trunk door closed, trapping her inside. It's now clearly night. The next scene skips to the woman, now beaten and bloody while tied to a chair. The location looks to be a warehouse somewhere. The only light coming from a single fluorescent bulb above the woman, illuminating pools of crimson red blood at her feet. The camera is steadily held, so much it seems to be propped up by a stand. I can hear the poor woman moaning in pain underneath the tape covering her mouth. I can also hear something shifting around on the concrete, like someone adjusting their stance. It seemed manic. I could hear clambering of metal, like tools being packed or unpacked from a bag. My stomach now fully turned. The stalker then walks into frame, showing only his back. His head was completely covered in baklava. He carried his blade in his right hand. My heart completely halted. The stalker held her drooping head up, tilted her face upward, and began to slice her throat from her left ear all the way to the right. She squirmed and gargled in her desperate and useless attempt to survive. I had never seen so much blood in my life. The killer then takes off his mask and stares into the camera, flashing a toothy grin. The film then abruptly stops. I was held in place by my now shot nerves. My blood slowed into stillness, completely discoloring my body into an almost corpse-like white. My grandmother was watching me. She, shakingly, tried to console me from across the room, struggling to form words through the rivers of tears streaming down her face. She said she didn't want me to ever be reminded of who I was before my accident. Oh my gosh. That was the end. Nice twist at the end. That was really well done. I mean, the obvious thought was that they're tapes of when the grandma was younger, or maybe this person's parents, like they never had a mother, they said, or something like that, and their grandmother was their mother figure. Dang. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. I'm gonna read some comments and take a sip of water, and we'll get into the next one. Got me with that twist. Nicely done. Oh, this one's a long comment, and I really want to read it. The last paragraph is a winner. What good horror stories will do. I think what precedes it lacks what better stories, irrespective of genre, manage. Basic storytelling with conflict driving the action and character, as in their wants driving the conflict. The best shorthand guide is to think of everything as setups and payoffs. An example specific to your story. The narrator being in the attic is just a circumstance, but the character helping out in the attic despite Grandma's insistence that he stay out would be the essence of conflict. We'd know his reasons for wanting to help. but Grandma's reasons would be a mystery until the end payoff resolves it. That might entail a longer story, but not much longer because every sentence would only be there to build the necessary setup. Not for its own sake, but it could be more effective story and hit home at the end with more impact. Doing it that way also adds layers by making the reader engage more fully with the characters because their motivations will be relevant to the outcomes. The prose is solid. There's a matter-of-factness to it that writers sometimes don't manage as they try to make the language elevate the story, but it just distracts instead. Your writing is clear and effective, and if the ultimate effect of that last paragraph is the principal aim, I think the style is perfect. Those were some awesome critiques. Oh my gosh. OP thanked them, by the way. Bro, this was so good. Like, your writing style creates such a clear picture of what's happening. It's like I'm literally watching something. 10 of 10. Everyone is also just shook that it was not the grandma or the mother. It was the narrator. Wow, okay. Sip of water between stories. Gotta stay hydrated. Hydration check, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to answer a quick text and we will get into the next one. Okay. This one is called Never Sleep in Your Car on a Road Trip by One Planch Man, and in between those words are underscored, so one underscore planch underscore man. I'm from Connecticut. I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia and would often make road trips down to visit her. I don't really mind. I love road trips. I have driven across the United States and back, all on my own. There's just something about traveling the highways of the US by yourself that's just so freeing. To save money, I would sleep in my car. It's not so bad. It's basically camping in a metal tent. Makes me feel like you're really rough in it. I just recline the seat back, keep the key in the ignition just in case, and doze off. No, I don't have anything to block the windows for privacy. Maybe I should have. The trip down south is a comfortable two-way drive. My stop would usually be somewhere along the Virginia-North Carolina border. So, for my previous trip, that's exactly where I stopped that night. Rest stops were often less trafficked and thus quieter than truck stops. Normally I would have stopped at Love's, but I was so tired that I settled for the first rest stop I saw. It was oddly vacant that night, with only a couple lone cars sitting forlorn under the amber street lamps, most likely travelers with the same idea as myself. I pulled into a parking spot away from the others, under the shadow of a tree and far from the street lamps. I figured I'd have more privacy there as opposed to being bathed in light. So I did my usual thing, locked my doors, opened the window just a hair for ventilation, kept my key in, reclined the seat, and went to sleep. I was never interrupted on any of these car camping nights, so I never suspected anything on this one. Then a sharp tap woke me up. At first, I thought I heard it in my dream. I opened my eyes a bit confused. Since I was leaned back, I was facing the ceiling and couldn't see anything. I heard another tap, like a tiny object hitting a hard surface. It came in irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping onto my windshield? I'm under a tree, maybe something fell from the branches. Maybe a squirrel or a bird had dropped something. What if a squirrel was climbing around in my car? Or what if it wasn't an animal? The thought occurred to me that it might very well be a person poking around outside. What did they want? Were the doors locked? Yes. The keys were in the ignition. I could leave in an instant. Still, I lay there, completely still, pretending to be asleep. Pretending I hadn't heard anything, hoping whoever it was, they would leave me alone. It was better not find out. I was too afraid to find out. It was better to stay here in blissful ignorance. Still, the tapping continued. I had to do something. There was no way I was going to just stay there. I had to look. My heart was pounding. In that moment, it was deafeningly loud. Whoever was out there could probably hear it. I decided I was going to look. I was going to raise my head up and see what was making the noise. So that's what I did. What met my eye sent a jolt through my entire body. Every muscle fiber locked up in pure shock at what I saw. The faint glow of the street lamps cast just enough light for me to make out what I was looking at. There, in the windshield, staring directly at me, was a face. Someone I presumed to be a woman was lying on my hood, her face pressed right up against my windshield. Her face was completely still, locked in a permanent grin. I froze in overwhelming terror. The eyes I stared into appeared to have rolled back, showing only the whites. The nose was turned up, pressing painfully into the glass. The lips stretched wide, revealing horrid, rotten teeth. Even in the darkness, I could tell her skin was sickly pale, contrasting her long, filthy black hair. Whoever this was, she was clearly not in her right mind. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to move. Finally, I got a grip of myself and shot my hand to the ignition. I turned over, making, in that instant, the most beautiful sound I ever heard. For a split second, I was afraid I might be caught in a horror movie scenario, the one where the car won't crank as the killer approaches. I reversed as fast as I could, trying not to give this creeper any time to try anything. In my panic, I remember activating the windshield wipers in a futile attempt to get her off. I thought, was I about to drive out of here with some wacko holding onto my hood? Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about that because as soon as I stopped, the woman leapt off, landing on all fours. Seeing my opportunity, I shifted into drive and gunned it, right as I saw her reaching for the driver's side door.
This or this.
Thank you, YouTube ads. The scariest thing that I will ever have on these streams. With my foot on the gas, I sped out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a piercing shriek like that of an animal. I looked at my rearview mirror, and for a split second I thought I saw her chasing me, running on all fours, her black hair swinging wildly around her. I couldn't get a good look. As I rounded a curve in the road leading out of the rest stop and merged with the highway. There, I picked up speed and drove through the night. I did not dare stop again until I saw the morning light. At the top comment has me. Okay, first, before I read that, that was really good. I started getting a little bit, I felt a little anxiety in me when they started describing the face pressed against the glass. I hate that stuff. In horror films, movies, no matter what, I hate when people press their faces up so close against the glass. Horrifying, absolutely not. That was really, really good. But the top comment says, it was nice of your girlfriend to meet you halfway on the road. Man, this is effed up. I'm gonna drive from India to the West Coast and almost slept in the car last night. Oh my gosh, nuh-uh. Never, ever, ever. Even if you lock your doors, even if your key's in the ignition, please, please don't unless you're in an area with a decent amount of people. Nah, bro, that was your girlfriend. She went through your phone. I used to travel for work a lot on one of my drives, and one of my drives was from California to Washington State. One time I was just past the California-Oregon border when I decided to take a nap for a few hours, as it was around 2 a.m. I pulled into a rest stop and had restrooms and some vending machines. Pulled up to the front for safety and security, and like you, I left the keys in the ignition in case I needed to nope out of there. I had just fallen asleep when a truck pulls up next to me. This woke me up because of the huge parking lot. This guy parks one stall away from me. I turn my head to look at him, and he looks at me and goes in the restroom. No worries, I thought, but just to make sure I stayed awake until he got back in his truck. He comes out of the restroom and kind of stands in front of my car looking at me again. He grabs his junk like he was offering it to me. And I was like, what the heck? And turned on my car and left. That was a fun story commenter. Everyone is just saying like, good job, you need a gun for that. Oh my gosh. Definitely get something to cover your windows. Creeps are everywhere, but that one didn't sound like it was human. Wow. Anyway. Once again, sip of water and then we'll move on. Okay. This one is... My friend works for the city's CCTV archives and has seen some disturbing things. And this is by 10 Minute Horror. I hadn't seen Mike in a few months. He'd been buried in work and our usual weekend nights out had about disappeared. Then he called me on a Thursday and invited me over for drinks. I jumped at the invite, but took note of how depressed he sounded on the phone. By the time I got there, Mike had already started drinking and was slurring his words. A dark cloud seemed to hover over him, which got worse as we drank. I finally asked what'd been going on with him. Mike turned darker, afraid. He said it had to do with work. I never really knew what Mike did for a living. I did know he worked for the city in the tech department, and was involved with the CCTV surveillance network, but I never knew what his day-to-day operations were, which he began to describe in detail. Mike explained there were thousands of cameras scattered throughout downtown core, outlying neighborhoods and well into the suburbs of our 1 million-plus city. His responsibility was to categorize and archive all the incoming footage. Most of the footage went into very general classifications and were saved in hard drive farms and identified with a lengthy combination of numbers and letters for categorical archiving. They were truly meant to be forgotten about. It was an expansive task, but Mike designed and built an AI screening program that detected common patterns in footage, then sectioned out anomalous behavior for review. Is this observation duty? The vast majority wasn't noteworthy, something like 99.99%. Then there was the 0.01%. The car accidents, assaults, swarmings, R-words, abductions, murders. Those went into a special archive for use in criminal investigations. And then there was the 0.0001%. They were held in a classified archive and contained footage capturing the events that, for all accounts, were unexplainable. This was called the Tartarus Archive. I looked up the word Tartarus after and discovered it was one of the darkest, deepest prisons from Greek mythology. It was said that if you dropped an anvil from heaven, it would take 7 days for it to reach the earth. It would take another 7 days for the anvil to reach Tartarus. It was the place you set titans when there was nowhere else that could contain them. Then when Sisyphus was condemned to an eternity of futility and frustration with a large boulder and a mountain slope, that punishment was carried out in Tartarus. As it turned out, the name was quite fitting to the archive's growing contents. Some footage could be simplified to strange optical anomalies in the camera, coincidences of light, or crackheads in the bender through the subway systems. Other footage, though, defied logic. The others are what captured Mike's mind that evening. He'd been breaking protocol and bringing hard drives home at night. In fact, he'd been splicing the footage together, capturing and compiling repeat aberrations and editing them into linear sequences. Mike wanted to show me some. It wasn't in a bragging or showing off kind of way. It felt more like the sharing of a heavy burden kind of way. I asked if showing me would get him in trouble, and he waved the idea away. I said, yeah, obviously I want to see what's going on in my city. Mike led me into his workroom, where he had monitors and towers and piles of external setup. We sat down and he skimmed through some drives nervously. Then he landed on one. Mike told me this anomaly was codenamed Lincoln Spectre. He pressed play. On the largest screen, black and white footage started up, showing Lincoln Avenue, one of our less attractive downtown streets, at 3 a.m. The camera angle showed the length of Lincoln Ave as it led into the downtown core. The street appeared empty and quiet. From a side road, a woman emerged, walking toward the camera. As she approached the intersection, she turned over her shoulder and appeared to scream. The woman took off, sprinting past the camera, which cut to a new, wider angle from another camera across the street. We watched the woman running frantically, seemingly being chased. But she was the only one on the street. There was no one else anywhere around her. The woman kept screaming as she ran, and the cameras kept following, cutting between different CCTV angles. We watched as the woman was chased into the middle of an empty intersection. She fell, then cowered as if something massive was standing over her. The woman's neck stiffened, and she began to levitate off the ground. Her body looked like a rag doll as something lifted her by the throat until she was floating, 12 feet above the road in the middle of the intersection. Then the woman's head snapped to the left and her body fell back to the ground. The video ended and went black. I sat, shocked. Mike saw my expression and said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." I asked if that was real, if what I saw was unaltered, was raw footage. Mike said all he'd done was put the clips together. None of the content had been touched. He told me he found out the incident ended up being described as a hit and run, and the case was left figuratively open for more evidence to amass, which it never would. The department kept the footage hidden, claiming it was a camera malfunction. No one outside of Mike and his boss had seen the video of how the poor woman actually died. I started to understand the air of somberness Mike was carrying around. Mike started the next video. This one was codenamed Black Crab, and was much longer than the previous one. It started in the subway systems, at the underground Walkley station shortly after closing up for the night. Walkley was the last stop on the route, and the exterior was shouldered by a new housing development on one side and untouched forests and swampland on the other. The camera was pointed down along the subway platform on the east side and showed its entire length with benches and garbage cans populating it. At the far end, the tunnel was filled with darkness. The lights on the platform shut off, and the station went dark. The camera switched to night vision, and everything became visible again. My eyes trained on the platform, waiting for something to happen. Finally, there was movement. It was coming from the tunnel. It was difficult to identify what exactly it was at first, as its movements were strange and the footage was grainy, but I got closer to the camera, and I got a better look. It resembled a human, a man, but he was walking on his hands and feet upside down, with his back arched and his stomach pointed to the ceiling. He had long, dark hair that dragged along the ground, and he wore tattered layers of old jackets and torn pants. He moved like a crab, jerkily yet quickly and easily as he made his way to the staircase. The footage cut to a new camera in the dark hallway leading to the stairs out of the station. We watched the crab walker claw up 2 steps at a time, then crawl over the turnstiles and toward the exit. The footage cut again, now showing the exterior of the station entrance. The crab walker squeezed and twisted and maneuvered his body through the locked and closed entrance gate. It looked impossible to accomplish, but he did. Once outside, the crab walker eyed his surroundings before skittering off toward the woods and disappearing. The footage cut to an hour later and revealed the crab walker reappeared from the woods. He was dragging a small animal by the tail in his teeth. The animal looked like a cat. The crab walker squeezed back through the gate, crawled through the station, and disappeared into a subway tunnel. Again, Mike saw my expression and told me there was more. He showed me the length of the video, which was over an hour long. Mike had compiled over 20 sequences of the crab walker creeping out of the subway station and into the woods. Mike skimmed through the video towards the end, and we watched the crab walker come out of the sewer in the downtown alleyway. It crawled over to a pile of garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Then it jumped into them like some kind of vicious frenzy ensued. There was someone else in the pile of garbage. Hands and feet thrashed about as they were struggling for their life. Then the movement stopped, and the hands jerked and feet went still. The crab walker's body moved jerkily about, but I couldn't see what was happening because of the darkness and all the garbage bags and boxes obscuring the camera's view. Mike leaned over to me and whispered that the crab walker was eating a homeless man. This caused a criminal investigation as the dead body was found mutilated and festering in an open alleyway. Mike followed up on the inquiry. What he discovered was the crab walker was who authorities believed to be a man named David Fletcher. Decades ago, David had been a prominent lawyer with a family. One Christmas, there was a house fire and his wife and kids were killed in the blaze. It was David's fault. He lost everything, including his mind. Everyone has a breaking point, whether they know it or not. A place where they've been too far and then snap. David found his. Family and friends described his descent as nightmarish. David lived on the streets, became too addicted to drugs, and tumbled into mental illness. The last anyone knew of him was from 10 years prior. He'd thrown himself in front of a subway at the Walkley station, and nobody heard from him or saw him again. It appeared that somehow David had survived the subway hit. His back had broken and healed strangely, causing him to move the way he did. He'd adapted to the new posture and lived in the darkness of the subway tunnels, finding sustenance from drained water and the wild animals he caught. That was what Mike found out, at least. But then he said, that was just the answer the investigators gave in Discovery. Who knows where the truth lay? Mike said there was always an answer for the videos he saw. Whether the answers were true or not, nobody knew. But the ones that had to become public all needed explanations, however absurd. Either way, David was never found and didn't reappear on the subway footage. Mike plugged a new hard drive in. He poured a fresh drink and told me that this was the one that was troubling him. The file was codenamed Cloud Mirror. I wasn't sure I wanted to see it, but before I could object, Mike pressed play. All the monitors lit up with footage from different intersections downtown, on the exact date and time as each other. There were 5 in total. The streets on each screen were empty and quiet, no cars or people. Suddenly, at the exact same time, in the center of the intersections, a small glow pulsed into existence. It was some kind of orb, roughly the size of a bowling ball. The streetlights around it pulsed with energy waves as the orb grew larger. It grew to the size of a beach ball. Then it flashed out. The streetlights went back to normal and the intersection was as lifeless as it was before. I asked Mike what they were. He told me he had gigs of footage of the orbs and had watched them repeatedly. He didn't know what they were at first. Then they started to change. Mike clicked onto the next video. Then the 5 monitors lit up with the same intersections and same time of night, but several weeks later. The streetlights glowed and pulsed, and an orb manifested into existence again. It grew to its beach ball size, then altered its surface and glow. Something gas-like replaced it, growing outward into a couch-sized cloud of dark gray. One of the cameras was closer, so it got to see the small clouds in detail. It looked like a volcanic eruption wrapping around itself. They were large, constantly morphing blobs that curled outward from a glowing center, resembling a mandelbulb fractal as a gaseous-based organism. It was fascinating to see them floating in the middle of the street, so alien to our roads and stoplights and street lamps. Then they began to move, gliding down empty roads. The cameras cut to different angles, following the clouds in some unknown path, zigging and zagging onto new streets and through alleyways. Then they'd stop. The clouds hovered in the center of their intersection, then lowered to the ground level, standing straight up like a large coffin. Holding rigid to this shape, their exteriors continued to shift and mold together like magnets made of smoke. Something on one of the monitors caught my eye. Down the street, people appeared. They'd seen the cloud and were walking toward it. The group looked so drunk and fascinated by the floating entity, so much so they were approaching it. As they did, the cloud became brighter. The street lamps around it pulsed. The group were in some kind of trance, staring into the morphing blob. One of the group, a guy, stared into it like a zombie and walked right into the cloud and disappeared. None of the group tried to stop him. Instead, another one followed him in, and another and another. All 5 members of the group disappeared into the cloud. Then they reappeared, one at a time, the guy first, then in the order they went in, only they weren't stumbling and boisterous and drunk now. They were walking upright, using minimal movements. They formed in a perfect 5-person circle for several seconds over quick words, then turned and all went in separate directions. Their strides, arm swings, and speed all matched. Another monitor showed a similar situation with a larger group of people, lost in reverie as they marched, one after another, into the cloud. Each monitor showed the same thing now, people entering the clouds and coming back out. Different. Mike stopped the video. I asked him if he'd shown this to anyone else. He said he hadn't. Not even to his one boss, which was the problem, because he was meeting with his boss in the morning to discuss some missing footage. I asked why he didn't show the footage to his boss. This footage seemed more than serious. People were being replaced by something. Mike sighed and put a new video on. The main monitor lit up and showed a new downtown street. The date was from earlier this week. One of the clouds was floating in the intersection. A middle-aged couple were walking nearby, the husband with a slight limp in his right leg. The couple saw the cloud and were sucked in by its aura. They approached it, eyes wide and mouths open. Both the husband and the wife entered the cloud and disappeared. After a moment, they reappeared. The husband's limp was gone. Mike turned to me and said, "That was my boss and his wife."
Yes.
That's the end of that one. Well then, that was long, but good. I liked all the different stories that they came up with to kind of put into one. That was really, really good. That was well done. I like the twist at the end, and no wonder he's scared to talk to his boss. It's not his boss. Let's read some comments. Excellent work. That was good. You should consider submitting it to an anthology. Well done. Such a great read. Hope your friend's boss is okay. This was good. Keep writing stuff like this. You're good at it. It's very satisfying, wonderful to read. You've got a gift. Keep using it. I couldn't take my eyes off your words. What an amazing story. What a job Mike has to do. He needs to sage his place and himself because these entities can and will follow him home. Praying for a light of protection can't hurt either. Well, I'm going to take a sip of water and then we'll move on. Okay, my throat hurt after that one. That was a lot of water. Anyway. Okay. We can probably fit 1 or 2 more in. This one is called My Husband Is Not My Husband by Altmoonvtn. My husband is not my husband. I've been with my husband for 30 years. We fell in love in high school and that whole cliche. We live in a small town in Illinois. No kids, but 3 cats. For the past week or so, he's been acting strange. And at first, I was really worried. I thought he didn't love me anymore. It started with him not talking to me as much. Usually he tells me everything. We're best friends. I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well, that work was stressing him out. Then he said things that weren't right, saying our boss Jess at work was getting married. But his boss's name is Kevin, and he's an old guy, about 85, and widowed. But maybe Kevin retired, and this Jess took over, and he forgot to tell me. It was just overall giving me a bad feeling, and I couldn't really explain it until today. I'm writing this as an example, to tell people that what the government is saying is true. I never trusted the government, but as you know, most sane people don't. Today started normal. The sun rose at 6:52 a.m. after I'd already gotten up out of bed. It's Saturday, but I'm so used to getting up early for work that I just get up early every day. I made coffee and sat on the couch to turn on the news. My husband usually gets up around 8 or so on the weekends, so I usually just sit around and read or watch TV until he's up. And then we make breakfast and decide what we're doing. This past week of him being weird made me on edge, so when we walked out of my bedroom wide awake and dressed at 7:05 a.m., my fear for the day started. Good morning, babe. He didn't ever call me babe, he called me his donut as an ode to our first date at a cafe, where I ordered a donut and he said that donut isn't a good lunch. Morning, you're up early. I smiled anyway, let him kiss me, and then he disappeared into the kitchen. When he was out of sight, I returned my attention to the news, and when I did, a message was on the bottom of the screen. If you believe that your loved one is not who they are supposed to be, remain calm and leave your home immediately. I stare as the message continues scrolling on the bottom of the screen, and then it changes. You are not crazy. They are not your loved one. You are in danger. I blinked a few times. The second Jacob walked into the living room, the message stopped scrolling. I'm gonna shower and then we can go out for breakfast, he says. He showers exclusively at night and we never go out for breakfast anymore. Okay, hun, I smile, cupping my mug in my hands. When he turns the corner, my eyes snap back to the screen. Leave your home immediately and find the officer at the end of the street. We know who they are. This has to be some kind of practical joke. Is it April 1st? The government will remove the machine in place of your loved one. We are working on finding your family. What the heck? Okay, at this point, I was scared. FileSaver, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the channel. Really happy to have you here. Either it was a joke, or I was in danger, and I didn't want to find out the hard way. So in my bathrobe and slippers, I turned the TV off and set my half cup of coffee down. The shower was still running. But when I stood up and made my way to the front door, it stopped. And thank you so much for the follow. These are probably bots, but if you're not, welcome to the channel. It's hard to tell with the username sometimes, but thank you so much for the follow. But when I stood and made my way to the front door, I stopped. Not even 2 minutes after it turned on. I stopped 2 steps from the door. When I turned around, Jacob was right there. I jumped. He had a very over-exaggerated, worried look on his face, almost unnatural. You startled me. I laughed, my heart racing. Is this my husband? I kept trying to examine him, but the way his body and face looked was so unsettling I couldn't stare. Where are you going? He asks, monotone. Nowhere. I thought I heard someone on the porch. I'm glad I can think fast because he believed it. Oh, is there someone out there? The next 3 moments, I realized it wasn't a joke. Because when Jacob turned to go to the front door, he glitched. That's the only way I can explain it. It was like watching a video of an AI on TikTok or something. His arm was in one position, and then 2 milliseconds it was behind his back. His head tilted to the side, and then his head went back, and his arm was back at his side, and he was normally walking to the door. My heart was racing. I needed to get out. That was a quick shower, I said. Yeah, I was sweating last night. I wanted to rinse it off. That was a lie. He was a cold sleeper, and last night it was freezing in the bedroom. I still don't know how I got out. After all the small talk, I think that thing realized I knew and it tried to kill me. All I know is I didn't drink the smoothie, and I got out. Now I'm sitting with hundreds or thousands of other people in our town's mall. Everyone's quiet. Everyone had a traumatizing experience. All they have told us so far is that it was a failed experiment the government was working on that gained its own intelligence and it's been multiplying, replacing our loved ones. It's not just our town, it's the whole country. If you're reading this and you think your loved one is not actually your spouse, kid, or friend, leave immediately. Find the officer. Get to safety. This is not a joke. They told us that the death count in the first week is over 1 million. These things are unbelievably smart. Please listen. Get out. Get out right now. That's the end of that one. Read some comments. That was good. I was really enjoying it up until the last part at the end where it kind of just skimmed over like, tried to kill me and stuff like that. So that was my one thing with this story, but it was very good. I love stuff like things replacing loved ones and things. I think it's so cool. Some comments are, I'd love to see this made into a movie. It's such a cool and fun sci-fi concept. It really is, honestly. That was incredible. I thought this was real, and then I read the name of the subreddit. This was good anyways. You are now entering the Twilight Zone. Everyone just saying it was really, really good. Goosebumps. I actually believed the part before the TV thing. Wow. Sip of water, and then we'll try to get in. We can probably do definitely one more. Probably not two, but we'll see. Okay. This one is called Daddy's Never Gonna Hurt You Again by Bert Schmidt. I was my dad's only child. For most daughters, your dad is your gauntlet, your perpetual steel curtain. But what happens when the shield instead becomes the dagger? What is this writing? Oh my gosh, wow, this is really good. Sorry, I had to break out of that and compliment the word choices. Amazing metaphors. Holy crap. You're after the heart of an English student. Oh my gosh. When you're 6, you'll do whatever you have to in order to survive because running away isn't an option. I knew it was coming. No revelation here. It was Friday night, and once night had spread its jam across the horizons, and it was only my mother and I, the dreaded routine of beatings and grasping at straws of futility had turned clocks into time bombs. Tick, tick, tick. It was on its way, but I didn't know when until Mama spoke. Go, Lily, go sit in the closet and wait for me. My mother was a Cuban immigrant, and nothing but courage flowing through her veins. Still, I never understood at the time what a restraining order was, nor why it could so easily be broken. When the rattling old engines thrumming oscillated the floorboards and potent, gagging exhaust fumes began to flow through the vents, I could only recoil and grit my teeth. Evasion was my only defense. Predicting that the level of his rage depended on the force of the car door slamming, so when it audibly shattered the driver's side window, I knew undoubtedly that the oncoming storm would be a dam breaker. As a child, my anxiety would render me motionless and stiff. A spider flashlight in a corner, I couldn't will my brain into making split decisions for myself. So when the door was being kicked in, hinges on the fray, and the immutable words, "Helena, Helena, you B-word, that door better be unlocked," seeped through the wall's invisible pores, I was rendered icebound in the primordial status of terror, even if running was the best choice. As the inevitable, gruesome point of contact raced to its apex, I masterfully dissociated from my body by focusing on 2 ants on the floor, carrying piles of potato chip crumbs. When the thud of my mother's body hit the kitchen floor, I was restrained into a sort of cosmic blur. The lumbering insect's spherical armor became magnified under my icy stare, and all I could fantasize was about my own incorruptible cloak of armor. If only I could unwittingly escape the horrors inevitable to come by staring at the scrape on the wall or a dent in the bureau, and imagining myself watching from the other side of the room to cope until it ended every single time. As for my mother, this night, no words were uttered. She never got a chance. "Lily, baby, Daddy's home. Come out and Daddy won't be mad." Muscles tensed agonizingly tight. I was petrified, stuffed, and mounted over Hell's mantle. Tears streaming down my cheeks, I had learned to cry silently. The stumbling, uneven footsteps on the first floor told me he was more inebriated than usual, and also it told me that Mom was really hurt. Usually she'd fight him with every fiber of her being on his way to the staircase, despite it always resulting in bloodshed. And then 1, 2, 3... The footsteps creaked up the steps. "Lily, here I come. Better be special for me tonight. Be a good girl and come out." Mom always instructed me to hide in a different place, but never ever told me to just leave. The internal force of my inability to react and the external evil of my impending doom had me feeling what was most familiar to me, and most alien to my peers at school: acceptance. And almost 6 years old, I was already prepared to die. 4, 5, almost up the steps. I was a caged lizard under a descending hand, wanting so terribly to escape, to harness the bravery to run to the bathroom and hide behind the curtain, but too frightened to act on it. Why couldn't I be a brave little girl? If ghosts exist, then please do something. Then that inevitable snapping of the broken top step. He's here. Dad was at the top of the steps, the bathroom, the shower curtain. Hide in plain sight. Do it, Lily, it's your only chance. The first place he'll look is in the closet. I want to add really fast again that this is a fictional story, because these things do happen in real life, but I want to reiterate that this particular story is fictional. I was screaming inside. Then I heard the bathroom door slowly creak open, steps moving inside, the shower curtain, metal against metal. He ripped it off the hinges. No Lily there. Where could she be? Where did Mommy hide you this time? Sweating, heart racing, fingers running up and down the delicate skin of my belly, brushed over the softness of my feeble, brittle little arms, over top of the already existing fault and fracture of years bygone. The artistic masterpiece of scars without rhyme, reason, or compassion. How much worse will it get? How much more blood will I lose once again? Dad was just outside the room, and then the footsteps halted, right outside the door. By the sound of the metal against the hollow door, I knew tonight he had a bat. Broke my legs with it once. I began to grip and tear at my clothes, pull at my thinning hair, and finally I couldn't hold them any longer. I began crying profusely in an effort to merely survive. Even if it meant bruises, lacerations, or even disfigurement, I stood up and got ready to step out into the shadow of the indomitable parental nemesis bearing down at me, growing in the darkness like a flat iron at dusk, ready to take the whipping, beating, or worse, that thing that would awaken me in sweat from my nightly terrors. If baby girl's in the closet, come out wherever you are. I'd accepted my fate, even rationalized it as simply the divine nature of karmic disaster, which has always spun in my orbit. It would always be this way. Why? The Lord works in mysterious ways. And then a dull, audible tack noise exploded across the house, and the floor shook loose, sealing plaster from a loud slam. Dad was so drunk he'd fallen over. Maybe now I could run, but I couldn't get my legs to move. And then the visual of my mom's bloody corpse flashed in my mind, and miraculously something imperceptible jogged loose my conscious will, and I sprung up and ran. I pushed out of the closet and sprinted to the door, prepared to jump over my dad's half-conscious body, evade the grappling swoop of his arm, and escape out the back. But as I approached the door, I was halted in my tracks. Standing in the hallway was my mother, unharmed and untouched, and at her feet Dad's lifeless body with an axe in his back. I gazed up at my mother with watery eyes in wonder and astonishment, and when her eyes met mine, she said the sweetest saying to ever fall upon my ears. Mama found a good hiding spot, baby. Daddy's never gonna hurt you again. That's the end of that one. So, my one thought, I am an English major. It doesn't mean I know everything, but I'm also a writing tutor, so I am trained to point out things and help people with their writing. I think this was beautifully written. However, my one, because this is a place where people put their short stories for feedback. So here's my feedback. You want to use good descriptors, but you don't want it to override your entire story. At some points, I found it difficult, especially toward the beginning, to understand what was going on because you used so many elaborate words. They were wonderful words, definitely great descriptors, but you can't shove that many into one sentence at a time, if that makes sense. So it just makes it confusing. That's my only complaint. It was beautifully written. And that's kind of what everyone else is saying, that it was beautifully written, amazing read, it felt real. And it's sad how many little ones go through this regularly. That's what someone said. I am going to pick one that's probably not as realistic. Even though I only have 5 minutes left of stream, I will be going over stream just to kind of end on a little bit of a lighter note, even though it's still going to be a scary story. Let's do the next one, called There's Something Wrong with Mary by Deadly Dahlia 92. Sip of water first, though. I watched her walk toward the car in shock and fear. Mary, don't. She slowly turned around and gave me a kind, reassuring smile. Don't worry, Jay. I'll call you tonight. Without waiting for a response, she turned back to the car. Why was I so worried? The Raisin sat behind the driver's seat of the truck, with a Cheshire grin plastered on his face. Lucas had a reputation of not knowing the definition of the word no. Several women, and more secretly known a few guys, had whispered of trials and trauma at his hands. The fact he had a police chief as a father made things no better. No one dared bat an eye. I went home and waited and worried. Finally, a light knocking came on my apartment door. There stood Mary, smiling her signature smile. I immediately wrapped my arms around her, eyes beginning to tear up. Are we going to stand out in the hall all evening? She laughed, brushing past me and heading inside. Following her inside, questions began spilling from my brain and out of my mouth. What were you doing with that creep? Have you lost your mind? What could you two possibly have in common? Laughing again, she turned around and gave me a knowing look. Ew, I said. I did not want the deets on that. We spent the evening as we usually did when we have a surprise sleepover. Laughter, delivery, wine, then bed. However, I awakened in the wee hours of dawn to Mary silently slipping out the front door. I paused for a beat. We don't have secrets. This woman knows everything about me, but do I really know everything about her? Especially since she's keeping rather unusual company these days. With not another thought, I slipped on my shoes and my hoodie and slipped out after her. I caught sight of her heading toward the park. I sped up silently, cursing every crunching leaf, every snapping twig. She exited the edge of the park and headed into the woods behind it. There was definitely something shifty going on, and I was going to find out what it was. I followed Mary's semi-tangible shadow through the maze of trees and darkness until I could see a bonfire burning in the small clearing. When I got closer, I felt my stomach drop. Holding Mary by her neck was Lucas. I began to run, but stopping dead in my tracks as Mary began to giggle uncontrollably. I didn't know how she could breathe, let alone laugh. Lucas tightened his grip. His eyes were a mix of cruelty and confusion. This only seemed to make her laugh harder. Then I realized her face began to change. Her soft, round features became sharper, more angular. Her eyes widened and slanted, becoming the color of the night sky, and her teeth became fang-like. Lucas, horrified, pushed her to the ground. Stifling a scream, I watched as she landed on all fours, her talon-like hands digging into the earth. Lucas, she hissed. Next thing I knew, she pounced on him like a cat. Lucas, how many lives do you plan to destroy with these filthy, filthy hands? He was punching wildly at her, and it did nothing to deter her. Opening her jaw way wider than humanly possible, she caught one of his hands and promptly began chewing. Lucas's scream filled the air, causing me to flinch. Angrily, Mary grabbed a handful of earth and shoved it into his mouth to stifle the screams. Shut up. You know you like it, she purred. Isn't that why you said as we screamed, as we cried, as we bled? He was now sobbing, looking utterly defeated, and bleeding out, no doubt. I stepped into the clearing and cleared my throat. Both their heads snapped toward me. Mary slowly smiled at me, while Lucas stared at me pleadingly. I smiled and nodded at her, spun on my heels, and made my way home. Something's wrong with Mary, and that's just fine with me. I like the ending. That was kind of a happy ending? I don't know. Reminds me of Jennifer's Body. Very much those vibes. Comments, love this. I need a friend like Mary. She seems cool. Excellent story, well balanced. I really like the reveal of what she is. The revenge play was superb. Only suggestion I give is a few subtle hints about her feline nature throughout the story. Maybe rolling her R every now and then, and her eyes looking strange sometimes. Maybe not liking mint or citrus. But careful not to spoil it, though. So I would give it sparingly. I'm finding it hard to critique, so I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. Don't stop writing. Awesome story. This person, my girlfriend's a werewolf, and I watched her devour my friend. This is fine. So true. Alright, we are gonna wrap it up. That was a shorter one, which is perfect because it's 5. Awesome. Let me change my music. And we'll hop over to my just chatting screen. Alright. We are gonna wrap it up, so thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I don't have too much to say. Tomorrow I'll be streaming at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with some more 3 out of 10. We're gonna do the final episode of Season 1 and the first episode of Season 2, which should be super fun. There are another 5 episodes in Season 2, so we'll be doing at least 2 more streams after tomorrow for 3 out of 10. Yeah. So, yeah. We're so close to 50 followers, guys. We can do this. If we get up to 50 followers and an average of 3 viewers, we will have all the requirements to hit affiliate, which is really, really awesome. So thank you guys so much for all the support. I'm gonna see if there's any friends that we can bring today, and while I'm doing that, those of you watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free, so you can always unsubscribe later. None of our friends are streaming currently, so we are just gonna end. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next stream. Bye, guys.